Peter Klein's wardrobe for the Standard is provided by Samtani & Son Tailors in Langley. Men's and women's tailoring. Samtani & Son. Fitted for you, fitted right.
I'm back with Nate Phelps. He's the son of Reverend Fred Phelps, the infamous founder of the Westboro Baptist Church. So it sounds like your father, to say the least, is kind of an overbearing guy, very strong in his opinions. What was it like to grow up in that household? You had 13 or 12 brothers and sisters, right?
12 brothers and sisters, yeah.
What was it like? Was there a lot of preaching involved?
Everything was about the religion. And part of that religion, part of his belief system was that he was to administer corporal punishment on not only the kids but his wife.
Corporal punishment, like beatings?
Yeah. And so there was a lot of that. And
like because you weren't paying attention in church, or what was the?
Anything. Specifically, if we weren't paying attention in church, anything that he perceived was misconduct. You know, I mean, kids got in trouble.
Right.
But his responses generally were a lot more intense than you would normally see. And he focused it on his wife from time to time.
Your mom.
That's right. And he was a very angry person. So when he was administering it, it was extremely violent at times. Lasting for hours. There was a lot of
lasting for hours.
Yeah,
like
the time. It wasn't just the specific beatings, but there would be some of the violence, and then he would just go on these long, hour-long rants about how our behavior was violating God's law, and that.
Did he think you were? We were talking before about this hyper Calvinist idea that certain people are elect. You're born saved. So he believes that he was born saved and he'll go to heaven. Did he think that his children were elect as well?
He was constantly looking for signs. He wanted that to be true. But
I mean, were some kids sort of, those guys are elect, I'm going to beat them less than these guys who are not elect? Were there favorites?
Well, there were favorites, but that's a different question. I think that he was always looking to see whether there was evidence for salvation. Ultimately, there was, each child, coincidentally, chronologically, had felt the calling, right? But I believe that was just one of those situations where it was pounded into us, and at some point we realized we need to respond to this, and so we did. Mm-hmm. And the problem with it was that once someone said that they had received an unction, or whatever term,
mm-hmm.
He had several terms that he would use for that, then there really wasn't anything he could say to counter that. I mean, he could look for evidence in your life that you were following the teachings of the Bible and that kind of thing, but he couldn't for sure say, no, this one is and this one isn't, because that's the essence of
right.
God. Nobody knows,
right?
So it was kind of a catch-22 for him. But what was a dead giveaway was if anyone openly defied his interpretation of the Bible, then it was clear that they weren't elect. And they
weren't elect.
Yeah.
I understand he made you run laps, like miles and miles. Was that sort of just to keep you guys fit? Was that a punishment? Was that discipline? What was the point of that?
Yeah, that wasn't so much something to do with his religion as much as it was about his tendency towards extreme behavior in every way. He ended up he had gained a lot of weight, and he was out of shape because he was taking drugs, amphetamines, and then he needed barbiturates at night. And he was going to law school, and he really got himself in trouble health-wise, and ended up in the hospital, and came out of that with this determination. And rather than just going out and developing an exercise program for himself and getting himself fit, it turned into this obsession of running 5 or 10 miles every day, and then eventually we're running 15 and 20 miles, and we're going out and running marathons, which, okay, that's not the end of the world, but we're talking about 7 and 8 year old kids who are out running 25 miles at a time. It points to this extreme behavior that he was always
I want to ask
engaging
you about that, because I'm not a psychologist, and I don't even want to be an armchair psychologist, but if there was a case where you could say someone has a mental illness, it seems like this would be the case. I mean, even the Baptist minister who ordained your father, B.H. McAllister, said that, you know, he saw at one point something just changed in him. Do you think that he's mentally ill? And sort of the second question is, if he is, does that sort of forgive some of the things he's done?
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but I've, you know, read some of the characteristics of certain mental illnesses, and I think that he demonstrates the characteristics of someone who is a sociopath. He has complete lack of empathy for others, and is extremely self-focused. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any trouble with the idea that he's got some mental illnesses. He would certainly never submit himself to any kind of an analysis. So.
But then, you know, like your sister Shirley has sort of taken over running the day-to-day operations. She seems to have the same level of fervor, doesn't she?
She does. I don't know how she is with her children. I don't know how she behaves with.
What was she like when you were growing up?
Well, Shirley, we talked earlier about, you asked a question about favorites, and she was clearly one of, you know, she was his favorite. So, and she was the kind of person who inserted herself, insinuated herself into situations where she would gain the most authority and attention from him. So it's not at all surprising that Shirley has become the kind of standard bearer for this campaign. But what you have to understand, Peter, is that in all of this, there's nothing new coming out of that system that I haven't heard, I didn't hear growing up. There is no original thought unless it comes from my father. So to say that she's a standard bearer is to say that she's the most effective at parroting what she's heard from her father.
Do you consider it a cult? Some people have certainly characterized it as a cult.
Yeah.
There's a brainwashing quality, because really only you and your brother Mark, we'll talk about in a moment, and I think another sibling have broken.
Dorotha, that's
Dorotha. Right. But 10 of them are still around, right? And sort of part of the whole church.
You know, one of them's kind of on the fringe, but she's still there, and she has her own special theology.
But is it a cult in your mind?
Cult is a, the short answer is yes, I think it is. I was actually preparing a speech for the University of Toronto, and was basically, because it wasn't to you know, this was a new group and I'd never spoken to this group before, this kind of, you know, where they're coming from, so to speak. So I was spending more time talking about the specific elements that existed in that environment and detailing them and giving some examples of it. And my fiance came in at the time, you know, at some point in that process and said, here's some articles about cults, go read them. And item by item, I had specifically addressed that in this speech. So they fit the definition. And I've said for years that all it would really take is if my father made the decision, found the right justification in the Bible, that they would turn towards violence, either violence towards themselves or someone else. That's not to say they will. That's just pointing out just how completely my father affects and controls their thinking and their lives.
Well, let's take a short break, but your father has a fascinating backstory that you'd never imagine would lead to this. He was really one of the leaders in civil rights cases, honored by the NAACP. You know, you say now he uses the N-word, so a lot more to talk about after the short break. Back with Nate Phelps.
It's America! America is doomed!
This is shameful.
Yeah.
Right down shameful.
Yeah, hon.
Got little kids like this. You guys need to be
You obviously raised your brat for the devil. You're a big gluttonous brat for the devil.
And you're going to hell.
You know, I don't agree with the lifestyle.
I don't, you do, yes you do.
No, I
oh
don't.
yes you do. You love fags, you hate God, so just shut up.
What was he talking about?
He's talking about, I don't agree with fags, but you know, que sera, sera.